Welcome back to Ranks and Reactions, y'all. Have you ever stood in front of the bourbon shelf and wondered what actually makes Kentucky bourbon different from Tennessee whiskey, or Indiana bourbon, or now Missouri bourbon? Is it just marketing, or does the state really matter? Or are we all just paying a little extra for a horse on the label? Well, today we're going to answer that question. And before anybody panics, I promise this is just a little bourbon educational moment. Ranks and Reactions isn't turning into a bourbon history channel. We are still going to make cocktails, we're still going to be reviewing spirits, and we are definitely going to be still making questionable decisions. But every once in a while, I think it's fun to learn why something tastes the way it does. So today, we're pouring Ben Holladay Bottled-in-Bond 6-year and using it to explore what makes Missouri bourbon unique and how it stacks up against Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana. For most people, when you hear the word bourbon, your brain immediately goes to Kentucky, kind of like hearing barbecue and thinking Texas, or hearing baseball and thinking the Yankees. But here's the thing, bourbon doesn't have to come just from Kentucky. In fact, now that we've made Missouri home, I figured it was time we start exploring what our new state brings to the whiskey world. And today we're starting with one that's been getting a whole lot of attention. Ben Holladay Bottled-in-Bond 6-year. Let's see if Missouri can hang with the big boys. Before we pour, let's settle an argument I hear all the time. Kentucky is bourbon's spiritual home. About 95% of the world's bourbon is made there. Thanks to limestone filtered water, dramatic seasonal temperature swings, and generations of distilling knowledge, Kentucky bourbon often leans towards rich caramel, vanilla, oak, and baking spices. Now, Tennessee whiskey is usually bourbon with one extra step. Most Tennessee distillers filter the whiskey through sugar maple charcoal before it goes into the barrel. That's called the Lincoln County process, and it generally softens the whiskey while adding a mellow sweetness. Jack Daniels and George Dickel are two of the biggest names. Then you have Indiana. Indiana has become America's whiskey factory. MGP Distillery produces whiskey that is sold under dozens of different labels. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, some fantastic bottles come from Indiana, but many brands buy Indiana whiskey instead of making it themselves. And then there's Missouri. Missouri decided they wanted their own identity. In 2019, the state passed one of the strictest bourbon laws in America. To be labeled real Missouri bourbon, it has to be mashed, fermented, distilled, aged, and bottled in Missouri. It must use Missouri-made oak barrels, and the corn has to be grown right here in Missouri. That takes local pride to a whole new level. So who exactly was Ben Holladay? Benjamin Holladay was known as the Stagecoach King. Back in the mid-1800s, before railroads dominated the country, he built one of America's largest transportation empires, moving people, mail, and supplies across the frontier. In 1856, he purchased what would become the Holladay Distillery in Weston, Missouri. The distillery is still operating today on its original site, making it one of the oldest continuously operating distilleries west of the Mississippi. After a major restoration in 2015, the distillery returned to producing bourbon there, and in 2022 released the modern Ben Holladay Bottled-in-Bond bourbon. Now, we've talked about Bottled-in-Bond before, so here's just a quick recap. This isn't marketing fluff. This means bourbon has to follow rules that date all the way back to 1897, America's first consumer protection law for whiskey. To qualify, it must have the following: come from one distillery, made during one distilling season, at least 4 years in a federal bonded warehouse, and the bottle has to be exactly 100 proof. Think of it as government's original quality guarantee. Maybe don't think of it that way. All right, that's enough history. Let's see what Missouri tastes like. color, beautiful deep copper. On the nose, I'm getting caramel, vanilla, toasted oak, cinnamon, maybe even just a little dark fruit. It's kind of impressive for a 6-year. Let's give it a taste. Oh, well, hello there. Right away, I get rich caramel, brown sugar, followed by baking spices. You can get the toasted oak and a nice rye kick at the very end. It's a mouthful without drinking hot. The finish hangs around just long enough for you to see why it's a bottled-in-bond bourbon. It's not trying to be Kentucky bourbon. It's really doing its own thing. So can Missouri bourbon compete? Absolutely. If you handed this to me in a blind tasting, I'd never guess it came from a state that only recently started getting national attention for bourbon. This is a really nice sipper. Really nice sipper. Ben Holladay has definitely pulled up a chair to the table with the big boys. Would I buy another bottle? Without hesitation. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. So, ranking it, this one absolutely makes me do a little happy dance. If you're a bourbon fan and you see a bottle of Ben Holladay Bottled-in-Bond sitting on the shelf, don't overthink it. Grab it. You might just discover that bourbon greatness isn't limited by state lines. Thanks for watching and enduring my little history taste test. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think. What state bourbon should we try next? Drink responsibly, laugh often. Until next time.